Hello, and welcome back to the Raising Well Nourished Kids podcast. This week, we're talking about that age old problem of kids not wanting to go to bed, often using excuses like they're hungry or, they want one more story or just delay tactics before bed and what that can mean and hopefully offer some simple solutions. I think this is a very common problem. I can remember at various stages through my kids' life, Jane, as you probably can, that they pushed back around bedtime. I can distinctly remember my daughter, especially, but she was always the more tenacious one of the two, where she would always come bedtime. We'd put her into bed. It was probably soon after she actually went into a big bed that she could get out of, that she would come out and say, I'm hungry. And yeah, everyone has a different way of dealing with that, but there's quite a few things that could be going on. It's not as simple as hunger, is it?
No, definitely not. Like from me, I mean, I'm coming from the emotional, psychological side, and I always get curious now about kids getting their emotional needs met.
Yep.
And how sometimes, if you think of food, it's how we nurture our kids, and food is a way to connect.
Yes.
And sometimes I think it's a way that kids have learnt to kind of put a bid for connection. Like, can
Yes.
I have a banana before bed? Is like can you spend a bit more time with me? Or I just need a little bit more of you sitting in my space to feel settled enough to go to sleep. Because our kids their nervous system and their emotional capacity grows through being with us, through safe relational experiences. And if you think in today's busy world, and I think of me as a young mum, where I was studying and working, and my kids had a real radar for that. I would sit down, read stories before going to bed, and sometimes my mind wasn't with them and with the story. It was with writing my master's or doing whatever I was doing. And kids feel that. They feel that lack of presence, and I think it can lead to that empty feeling that kids then kind of get confused with hunger.
Yes.
And so I think sometimes it can be that they have that need for us to just be really present and connected, and for their nervous system to rest in our nervous system, to be able to settle, to be able to go to bed.
Yeah.
Something else I'm seeing a lot is kids that have high anxiety but kind of don't know how that feels in their body. And so they get this really strong feeling in their stomach, which is anxiety, but they're confusing it with hunger. And almost a panic comes with it, like, oh, I'm really hungry. And it's like inviting parents to support their kid to get curious, like, oh, what's happening? Sometimes we get this strong feeling in our stomach, and it's actually because we're worried about something or we're scared about something. And it's not that we're hungry, we're anxious. And then to kind of support that your child, to have that conversation with you about what they might be worried about or what they might be anxious about, and even giving them ways to kind of manage or learn to kind of be less impacted by the anxiety. So things like teaching them how to feel their feet on the ground and wriggle their toes, or even I teach kids a lot to welcome the feeling of anxiety. I teach kids that, that anxiety is trying to educate you in some way. It's probably, sorry, not educate, but it's trying to keep you safe. It's working really hard to protect you. And so we're going to welcome the feeling and get curious about, what it's trying to protect you from. And so I'll teach kids to kind of maybe put their hands on the feeling and offer some kindness to the feeling. Something really important with kids is their nervous systems aren't fully developed. And what we're not told enough is that kids aren't able to self-regulate. They need adults or a more grown-up nervous system to co-regulate with them. So when a kid is feeling anxious, it's really important that they have an older, more regulated nervous system with them that kind of supports them with those big feelings and teaches them how to kind of manage those feelings. So movement can be really helpful with anxiety, but also maybe if it's bedtime, maybe there's a quiet meditation. There's so many meditations available online. Just a 10-minute meditation where you're lying side by side holding your child's hand or something like that, or both of your hands are on the tight spot on the belly. You can teach them breathing techniques. You can teach them even so like breathing techniques. Different music has an impact on our nervous system, different smells, so you can put different smells in an oil burner to help kind of support them with anxiety. Movement's really helpful, even weight, so weighted blankets, and even squeezing your child's muscles can be really, really helpful before they go to bed. So there's lots of different ways to kind of support your child with anxiety. I think the most important thing and helpful thing for a child is to acknowledge the anxiety and to not make it a bad thing, to teach your child to get curious about what that feeling needs. What's the anxiety worried about? Because in our culture we get taught to push away bad feelings. Yes. And we get strong feelings because there's a need underneath them. And if we push them away, we never get to meet that need. And so the feeling has to increase and get bigger to get our attention, to get the need met. So if we can teach our children to kind of move towards the feeling with our support and to almost talk to it, get curious. And something else that can be really helpful is to support your child to notice where they don't feel tight and where they don't feel anxious. Because kids can freak out and think it's all of them. And it's like, well, how do your earlobes feel? Do they feel tight and anxious right now? And to support them to take their awareness away from where it's uncomfortable. Because our brain kind of can focus in and really get more and more freaked out by the pain. Yes. And so a way to kind of support your child is to get curious about where it's not sore. And then so it might be the fingertips, so you can invite them to notice their fingers and to notice that their fingers are calm and that their fingers feel okay. And they can hang out there, and then what do you know? Generally that helps the anxiety to calm down. And then you can go back to the tight feeling, and generally it's less, and then you can go back to the fingers. It's a technique called pendulation, where you're moving towards something uncomfortable and then moving towards something that's more comfortable. So you're moving.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So many good tips there. Yeah, I know just with listening to you talk, I can definitely reflect on the times where, when I was perhaps stressed or we'd had a really busy day that was focused on things that weren't child friendly, like just a busy day all round. We were rushing from one place to the next or so forth. They were definitely the times when my kids would require more of me, and, I'd see it as acting up in those days. I didn't know any better back then. So I would think that they were just being difficult or naughty or, and not wanting to go to bed and trying to push out the bedtime. And listening to you and, as I said, reflecting on those times, it was most definitely that they just hadn't had enough of me, or they were feeding off my uptight nervous system, that they were kind of reflecting back to me what I was already feeling, and that I was just wanting to get through bed and get them to bed and, because I needed my time to kind of decompress from the day as well.
Yeah, I can totally relate to that.
Yeah.
And I think they totally ping off our nervous system. Yes. And I feel like culturally that's kind of how we were taught to raise kids, like that. Yeah. That just kind of they needed to get in line. And I love that we're starting to realise, there's a need underneath every behaviour. Yes. And the other thing, just hearing you talk, that I've realised is we forget how much how valuable we are as mums and parents, how much
Yeah.
our kids value us. I did anyway. I didn't realize how much my kids valued me, and
Yes.
I think it can kind of be our own story, I guess, where we don't value ourselves much and we don't realize how much our kids value us and how much our kids value our presence and
Yeah.
just being with us.
Yeah. And look, I mean, from my perspective as a naturopath, often there is actually hunger as well, which we also have to acknowledge. If that's the
Yes,
excuse that's
definitely.
being used,
Yeah.
then we need to examine, is there something that is driving them to feel hungry? And in my experience, often a day that lacks dietary protein and enough fiber in the day, particularly starting at breakfast. I mean, what we eat from the
Yeah.
get go, I
Yeah.
have witnessed not only in clinic, and dealing with young children, but also in my own family, that the days where, and often again it coincides, funnily enough, with those busy days, now that I think about it,
Yeah.
where, you're out and
Yeah.
about, as I said, you perhaps got stuck out and you've had to buy something for lunch. And, it's hard to get a really good quality meal when you're out and about and you're not prepared. So
Yes.
often, it can be a bit of both, can't it, really?
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yes.
definitely making sure that I've noticed that, my kids, when they don't have enough breakfast protein and fiber, then they tend to really start off on the wrong foot, and their blood sugars aren't regulated from the get go, which often means that their mood is also not regulated, their appetite is not regulated, and they're, become kind of constantly hungry, wanting to snack all day. And if it has been a day where there's been lots of snacking, which are generally carbohydrate based, it's hard, outside of something like biltong or meat sticks, which actually weren't around when my kids were little.
Yeah.
There weren't a lot of, most of your store bought snacks are largely refined carbohydrate. They lack in fiber, the two things that we need to support a healthy appetite. So often come dinner time, they're also acting up at the dinner table or not wanting to eat what's being presented because their blood
Yeah.
sugars are already dysregulated. So it's a bit of a vicious circle, really, isn't it, as you kind of
Ah,
talk it
totally.
out?
Yeah.
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 So, I
And
mean,
so easy
that's,
to. Oh, sorry, you go.
yeah, no, I was going to say, so that's also a really important consideration, that we can't, sometimes it's not just the one thing, it is a combination of the day's events that leads us um, to developing that pattern. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
And I know for me, that's one of the biggest things I've learnt from you is the importance of protein. Like now I
yeah,
think back and think, gosh, how did I not know that? But I didn't. And I
yeah,
remember when you and I started working together and you really kind of stressing the importance of protein in like you say, balancing everything, the
yeah,
blood
it is.
sugars, the hormones, the emotions. Like it's
Yeah,
just so important. And I guess especially at the bookends of the day, hey, like brekkie and
yeah,
dinner.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And just, yeah, and as I said, not, starting off on the right foot as well as you can, not just protein but fiber, a balanced diet generally, but protein definitely needs to feature. And children, one of the main reasons it's so important is because children are growing at such a rapid rate and developing, their cells need protein. You need protein to be able to grow. We're made of protein. So, and
Yeah.
we can't
Yeah.
make protein ourselves. We have to ingest it. So it's a
Yeah.
really important thing, consideration in anyone's diet, any human's diet, but particularly during growth phases in kids.
Yeah.
And yeah, a good range of quality proteins is super important. We have done a podcast episode on protein, and that's full of ideas for what to eat to improve your kids' protein intake. So definitely have a look at that. But yeah, it is just so critical. And it's such an incredible, most protein sources, animal based protein sources in particular, are incredible sources of not just protein, but a lot of really essential vitamins and minerals, even things like zinc, which really supports a healthy appetite and can really help, to ensure that food fussiness doesn't get a hold. So,
Yeah.
making
And
sure that zinc levels are good is important. And as I said, zinc is found largely in animal sources of protein, particularly seafood and red meat.
yeah, and I'm thinking even your Bs, hey, your B vitamins
Yeah,
that are
B
so important for
vitamins. Yeah,
stress and
yep,
yeah.
yeah. Yeah, so it's like, it's interesting, isn't it? When we first started talking about doing this podcast, you were talking about seeing children, in your clinical practice and, you were helping them on one hand, but they weren't eating well on the other hand, and how important the two actually, and vice versa with me as well, that
Yeah.
they, were perhaps, I got them to the point where they were eating well, but they still
Yeah.
needed support in understanding the way that their nervous systems worked and how to deal with stress and stresses, which I couldn't offer them. So that's why we kind of came together, isn't it, to do the work that we've done with Well Nourished Kids and with the podcast. So,
Yeah. It's been
hopefully this
great.
helps. Yeah. And yeah, as I said, it's really, again, a holistic approach and really deep diving and trying to, this is going to happen regardless. But I know with my kids, it was always going back to the drawing board if I recognised that we were falling into a habit of just being busy all of the time, and they were developing, we were getting to bedtime, and I was feeling uptight, and they were stressed, and they weren't wanting to go to bed. Then you really have to reevaluate. What's going on, and often it is simple routines that need just to be sort of shaken up, or
Yeah.
getting really really focusing on important nutrients in the diet and so forth. So yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
hopefully that's helpful for everyone, that little short
Yes.
discussion. It is a
Yes.
common issue, and it's something that, yeah, as I said, I can remember at various stages in my kids' lives, them pushing back on that dinner time and a bedtime routine. And yeah, as they get older, it becomes a different problem yet again, doesn't
Yeah.
it? Which maybe
Yes.
we can discuss in a another podcast. But sleep is so
Yeah.
important. So it was something that I
Sleep's
always found
huge. Yeah.
distressing when they did push back on it, because I knew that they just needed to get to sleep.
Totally. For
Yeah,
everything, hey?
yeah, it
Learning,
really is.
being able to have relationships, sleep's massive.
Everything. It really is. Yeah, being able to exercise, feeling as a parent, feeling motivated to cook if you haven't had a good night's sleep, that
Yes.
goes out the door. It definitely has a
Totally.
cascade effect on everything, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah,
We'll do
definitely.
another podcast on sleep.
Yes.
Have we done sleep? I'm
Sounds
not
good.
sure.
I don't think
Yeah.
we have.
No,
Yeah,
I don't think
cool.
we have. We really need to do that. Okay. Hope
Thank
you've
you
enjoyed
all.
listening, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.